Welcome back again to the Wizard Shop. You caught me on the weekend. I'm actually doing a little work on my Corvette and taking a little time and do some things that I want to do. And I thought while I was here I would go ahead and we're back to the Cadillac. We've actually made some progress on it. You guys have been waiting very patiently for an update. So this has been kind of slow going, and one of the reasons why is because I have customers and customers come first. Then if I get some free time, I come over here and work on it. And Junior Mint's been doing a lot of it. My summer help, if you've seen some of Tyler's videos, Junior Mint is in it. He's done most of this. He's done pretty good. So I'll go ahead and give you guys an update. Come on over and I'll show you what we've done. So here's the engine bay. The last time you just saw basically a naked engine sitting in here. We've got some spacers on the engine mounts to raise it up, and that was the way to make sure it cleared everything underneath the steering linkage and all that. He's got everything's spaced out just right so the fan can spin freely. This is the stock Oldsmobile diesel fan and pulley and water pump and everything, and as you can see, perfectly within the already made shroud. No hitting, no rubbing. This is going to work great. The clutch that I have on here is off of the Cadillac. It mounts right up. Everything bolts right up. Put all the accessories on yet, but he's got this thermostat housing and neck on. We've got the injector pump timed up and installed. All the lines and injectors. All the little glow plugs are installed. We have, setting aside somewhere, we have the harness for the glow plugs. We got the fuel filter, the vacuum pump, and we got the vacuum pump. I'm going to run a large reservoir, and that's going to hold vacuum to run my power brakes. I wouldn't want to run the power brakes just off of the vacuum pump. It may not be adequate, but if I have a large reservoir, there'll be plenty there for 3, 4, 5, or 6 stops, which is plenty enough. That's what you would have anyway, almost. We've got the horns right here. Let me set this aside and show you this. There's the air cleaner. This is really cool about the Cadillac. I didn't expect it to work this well, but we removed the horns and we removed the radiator reservoir here. We're going to move it out here, and a battery fits in there just perfectly. You can look down in there. It's actually just got a tray already made for it. So what that's going to allow me to do is have 2 dual batteries. I don't know why they have a setup over here that matches this side exactly. Maybe they would have had 2 batteries for some reason. Maybe for a hearse or something, or a ambulance, I don't know. But that's perfect. That'll work great for both batteries. Pretty much all the mechanical stuff is, as far as bell housing and mounts and all that, has been done and figured out and hooked up. We're just now hooking up accessories when we get time. So that's where we're at on the Cadillac. We're getting there. We're actually getting close to starting it once we run some fuel lines and make sure it's going to be a good motor before we go further. But anyways, I thought you guys could get an update on it. So that kind of brings to mind the whole idea of engine swaps. Some of you that are watching this are pros at it. You guys know everything there is to do about it. This really isn't aimed at you. This is aimed for people that, you know, what is an engine swap? What's all involved with that? Maybe some people are thinking about doing one. Well, here's some things to think about. Some things you're going to have to think about is your transmission. Let's say if you're putting a different automatic in, how are you going to make this hook up to your transmission, your shifter? Your steering, your power steering. How is the power steering pump on the engine you're swapping in going to hook into your steering gearbox? So what are you going to do for the pressure line and the return line? Will the threads match up? Will the connections be the same connections, the same way that they seal together? So that's something to think about. Let's head out to the engine bay. One of the biggest concerns when you do an engine swap is oil pan. Where's your oil pan going to land when you place it inside the engine? Is it going to hit on the cross member? Is it going to hit on the steering linkage? Is it going to hit on, is the exhaust going to be in the way? Like on an LS engine, it's really nice and easy. There's aftermarket oil pans and stuff, but if you're doing an oddball swap, like, hey, I'm going to put a Ford 5.4 in an old Dodge or something weird like that, your options are going to be very, very limited. So that's just one of the things to check out is the oil pan, also your motor mounts. Where are they located on the engine you're swapping in, and where are they going to bolt in on the frame or the cross member? How are you going to get that located? Another thing is distances. Is there going to be enough room this way? Is there going to be enough room this way? Like on Apollo 911, it was supposed to be an easy swap. It's supposed to bolt right in. And the amount of hacking and cutting that I had to do to make it work almost made me sick to my stomach. It was like, this is obviously not a bolt-in deal. It's a lot of fabrication. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, your exhaust. Where does the manifolds dump out? You might find that the manifold dumps right on top of your cross member. That's not going to work.
Car Wizard, isn't that what you found on this one? Didn't you have to change that?
I had to get a different exhaust manifold off of old 350 or 400 from the 60s. It bolts right up. It's the same bolt pattern, but it has a different exit for the exhaust. Your accelerator linkage. How are you going to hook your gas pedal physically to the engine? Some engines have a little linkage or a lever that pulls the throttle. Some of them have totally different setups than that. How are you going to mend the two together? You got to think about that. Your brakes. Are you putting in an engine that used Hydro Boost in the original vehicle and now you have vacuum brake? Or is it that you're going to use Hydro Boost and run the power steering system to run your brakes? That's an option. I mean, those are things to think about too, is your brakes. It's easy to get single, narrow-mindedly say, I'm just going to put the engine in and make it run. And there's a whole slew of other things that end up being roadblocks that kills many projects. You get to a certain point and you're like, oh my goodness, this isn't going to work and I don't have the money to go further. Or some of you might live in an area that has a homeowners association, or you might live in an area where it's not convenient to really work outside. That's something you got to think of. This type of work, this is a simple swap. It takes so much time. I have to reach back in my years of experience to make things work on this. Junior Mint gets to parts and he's like totally just stumped. He's like, I can't go any further. I don't even know what to do. But in my mind, I know all the different years and different things of types of parts and pieces that different manufacturers use, things that I can adapt, things that I can make work, and we always get through the roadblock. Imagine if you don't have that. I mean, you have to go online and Google it or search it, but it can be time consuming, hugely time consuming. So, luckily I have a shop that's big enough to store this in. It can just sit here and it doesn't take up space. It's not a big deal. But if this was your driveway, you might get some complaints from your neighbors. So you need to keep that in mind. Or maybe your wife might want her garage back. You say, you know, enough of this. Maybe you'd plan 3 or 4 weeks and you're 2 months, 3 months into it, and it's like, okay, this is getting old. The wife's getting pissed off. The neighbors are getting pissed off. You need to keep that stuff in mind. Typically on a swap, however long you think it's going to take, you need to triple or quadruple that number. However much money you think it's going to take, say, oh, I think I can do it for $3 grand. And it's probably going to be 9. I mean, honestly, seriously. It's going to take you much longer because you're going to have to save up the money to do it. It's just crazy how much money and time it takes. And so I got a few more things to show you guys to think about. Let's head on over to, I have a transmission here. I want to show you something. So this is a Maserati transmission that we're actually going to be using the parts off of to fix Tyler's Maserati, but I'm going to use it to show you some of the roadblocks you could come up against. Let's say you're putting some weird oddball BMW transmission into a Chevy Camaro or something crazy. There's people that do weird stuff like that. And you've got a ZF transmission and you've got your stock drive shaft. Look at this. How are you going to make this come together? How is this supposed to work? And I'm not going to be in there to answer the question for you. You're going to be staring at this with a flashlight, not sure what to do or where to go with it. How are you going to make this work?
How would you fix that?
You would have to find a way to take this off, this nut, and maybe there's an adapter, or you can have a specialty company make you a flange, or take this yoke off and put on a flange that matches this. It can be done, but again, this is not going to be $50 to get it going. This is probably going to be $500 or $1,000. I mean, I'm serious. That's what this stuff takes. This right here can completely demolish any dreams of a swap. These types of things right here can just totally wipe you out. You have to be careful with this stuff. Before you even think about the engine that you're going to be putting in or the transmission, you need to be, before you've even spent the money, you need to think about, how is this going to work? How am I going to put these together? You don't want to find that out or get to that point after you've spent the money and you say, oh, I guess I can't use this transmission or this or that. Now you've spent the money, and what do you do with it? So that's something to think about. Let's take a look over here. This is the shifter that it uses. This is the shift cable that comes down to this shifter. Maybe your car that you're swapping into has something completely different, a different setup altogether. How are you going to make that work? If it's on a Chevy transmission, it'll have a sensor, range sensor right here. And then maybe the hookup, or the actual holding bracket is back here, at the corner back here. And the cable comes down to that. And now how do you make it bolt up to this, or how do you make it, this is another thing you need to think about whenever you're going to do a swap. How am I going to get my shifter to physically shift and go all to the correct positions and all that. So let's come around to here to the front of the transmission. So it's easy to think, oh, I'll just find an adapter and bolt up the transmission to whatever I want. And that's very unlikely. There are some engines out there that there are specialty companies that make adapters and things, but look at this weird drive flange here on this torque converter, and it has a small bolt circle. Imagine trying to hook that to this. That's an old 472 out of the Fleetwood Slowham. Does this look like a nice small bolt of circles? No, it's a weird zigzag pattern. This is a BOP setup, Buick Oldsmobile Pontiac Cadillac. It has the dip in the middle. How are you going to make that weird drive flange match to this on the flex plate? The starter on this engine sits down here and the nose is out here, which will hit right here. What are you going to do? Cut that off to fit the starter? So you can see that it quickly, very, very quickly, a swap can get out of hand. And you can have your significant other saying, we talked about $2,000 or $3,000 to do the swap. You're needing another $2,000 or $3,000. This isn't working. It can actually create marital problems. A swap can. If you watch FYI, Car Issues with Tyler Hoover, he bought a Ford F-150 Lightning from a guy who actually just went through a divorce because of that truck. I mean, it's just, you have to be careful with this stuff. Luckily, Mrs. Wizard keeps her garage and gets to clean it and arrange it how she wants, because this is the Wizard's area here. I don't work at home. I don't work on my stuff at home. I don't have to. I have all the room here. So I'll finish up with a few more tidbits of advice. These are things that I've made mistakes, things that I've messed up over the years and completely just ruined the vehicle. You take my advice and use it. Don't scoff at it, because it's real. Another thing you need to think about, do you want to have air conditioning in your ride? How are you going to make the AC compressor match up to the lines? Maybe the compressor that's on your engine that you're swapping in doesn't have these fittings. How are you going to tie in to that? Cruise control. This has an old style mechanical cruise control, but some of like GMs have a little box with a cable. It's something similar, but how are you going to make all that work? This is going to, if this was electronic, it's going to look for a signal from the transmission. And now it doesn't have a signal because you put some other oddball something in there. Now you lost your cruise control.
Car Wizard, does this happen more often when you exchange a more modern day engine with an old classic engine like this car?
Yes, that happens a lot. Like with an LS motor with the computers, you can send them off and get them changed. You can change the VAT security. You can have EGR, EVAP systems turned off to make it work on the old car. You can change a lot of things, but if you're doing an oddball swap where there's no support for changing the settings in the computer, you're screwed. It may crank and crank and crank and crank, and it never starts. Speedometer, that's another one that comes to mind. Maybe you're putting an electronic transmission into a cable-driven speedometer. You better hope to God there's some sort of an adapter or something that for that transmission to give out a pulse signal. And hopefully it's the right amount of pulses per mile or per minute or whatever to make your speedometer work. So I'm not trying to scare you guys or discourage you. Engine swaps can be fun. They can be rewarding when you get it, make it all work. But they also can destroy your marriage. They can cause bankruptcy. They can cause you to get in trouble with your homeowners association. They'll give you 30 days to get the car out of there, or you're fined heavily. So be careful and be thoughtful before you do the swaps. Think about what you're going to do. Run through all these scenarios that I've told you and order parts or engines or whatever accordingly. Now you think, well, I'll just have my local mechanic do it. I've had a few offers for that. And when I tell them I need $5,000 up front, and it'll probably be another $5,000 after that, that usually kills their dreams right away. Honestly, that's what it takes. There's places like Monster Garage or Gas Monkey Garage. Do you think they're doing those projects for $3,000 or $4,000? No, it's like $40,000. Check on it. Check on it. Double check me on those numbers. It is hugely expensive to pay a mechanic to do this kind of stuff. So I hope that gives you guys some pointers to help you out in your swaps if you're getting into some swap. Just be thoughtful, think about what you're doing before you do it. And along the way, if you get your shirts dirty and you get grease all over them, and I know where you can get some more shirts, Car Wizard shirts. Click the link below, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're not already watching Car Issues on FYI, make sure you go and check it out. Maybe you've got a friend or a family member that's got FYI. It's worth it to go hang out at their house on Saturday at 9 o'clock. Trust me, it's worth it. Very, very good show. Getting very good ratings so far. So again, thanks for watching, and many more cool videos to come.